Hey everybody, my name is Jim Toland and welcome back to the Azure Database for MySQL monthly webinar. I'm a senior product manager with the Azure Database for MySQL team. We're live today on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch. And for those who might have missed any of our previous episodes, you can check out the recordings on our YouTube channel. Our handle is at Azure Database MySQL, Azure DB MySQL. Our agenda today includes 2 deep dive sessions followed by a look at our upcoming feature roadmap. We're going to start off by having Dsouza talk to us about buffer pool performance parameters for Azure Database for MySQL. And then we'll have Shreya jump on, Shreya Aithal, and she'll discuss building a PHP app, building a PHP and Azure Database for MySQL flexible server app on the app service, Azure App Service. And then finally, I'll do the latest feature releases and upcoming roadmap. So to get started here, I'm going to mention if y'all have any questions or feedback, please feel free to drop that straight into the chat window. You can also just say hi or whatever, just to let us know that you're there and where you're calling from. And if you do have any questions, we'll address those as we go through the session. We have our product expert, Satish, in the back end, who's monitoring the chat, and he will take care of addressing those questions as necessary. So now let's get started with our first section. I'd like to invite Dsouza, a senior product manager at Microsoft, to share with us details about the influence of NODB buffer pool parameters on application performance while using Azure Database for MySQL. So hi, Neil. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Could you please share a little bit about yourself before we jump to your presentation?
Thank you, Jim. Hey, everyone. My name is Dsouza. I'm a senior product manager with the Azure Database for MySQL team for the past couple of years. And today I'll be taking you through mainly some of the buffer pool related parameters and some new metrics with the Azure Database for MySQL.
Fantastic. Thank you, Neil. We're going to I'll go ahead and hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Jim. So to start with, let's go to the first slide. So here we are talking about memory management a little bit. So wherein when you create a flexible server, Azure Database for MySQL flexible server, you actually get a specific set of memory, the physical memory, with the compute SKU that you pick. Like for instance, if you pick 2 vCores, you will get 8 GB memory in a general purpose tier. Same thing, the memory doubles when you go to the business critical tier. However, for certain workloads, if we tend to run out of memory, so we have incorporated a new feature with where we use a certain temporary storage on SSD to prevent out-of-memory errors or any issues where we used to run out of memory. Those situations are handled. This is something new, so hope you can make use of this feature. Let's go to the next slide. And here are some of the metrics that we have added to troubleshoot some of the query performance or tracking how your buffer pool, like buffer pool data, buffer pool dirty bits, or buffer pool free, and other buffer pool parameters, and especially issues like with your queries, like that could lead to deadlocks, and you could track some of the stuck transactions or locks using these parameters. We are exposing it to customer. So you can add these metrics to your to the metrics in the metrics blade on Azure Database for MySQL, and you can monitor these and troubleshoot those query performance issues and tune your queries. Let's go to the next slide. So here, today's demo, we will be talking mainly about these 2 parameters, the InnoDB buffer pool load at startup and InnoDB buffer pool dump at shutdown. So basically, whatever is loaded in the cache into the buffer pool will be retained during a server restart operation. So this helps with workloads that are read heavy, and when the server starts up, even your initial queries will be as performant as they are read from the cache directly. So we'll see how we go ahead and show you the difference with these parameters set to on and off. And that's the demo today. And we'll show you how to basically look at the metrics and track it, a little bit of how you can monitor and troubleshoot these issues. So, okay, so in today's demo, so we have a Azure Database for MySQL flexible server here, and we take a look at the server parameters, and it's simply you can type in to get the parameters that you need. And as you can see, if you click all, you can see all the parameters. Now here, both the parameters that we discussed about, the dump and shutdown is on, and loaded startup is on as well. So this, we are setting this to on by default here to take benefit of these features. Now let's go to this one of the VM that I've created. Here I will be running some standard read benchmark. So basically some read queries thrown to the server, and we will just look at how the metrics behave when there is some kind of read workload onto our database server, and I'm going to restart it while we are executing those. And this is just to show the metrics for you. And when you restart, obviously, the benchmark that we are running, it will not be able to complete the queries when it restarts. But then when it comes back, we will reinitiate those the read workload, and we'll look at the metrics a little bit deeper here. So now the server is going through a restart. And now by default, our buffer pool should be retained. So when I loaded the data and ran a bit of the read workload, it would make sure that the buffer pool data is filled up. And as you can see, I'm looking at the buffer pool pages data as a metric, and you can see it is loaded up with the information. And while we are restarting the server, you can notice that the graph is going downwards. So it is dumping the data into the buffer pool into a file, and we will notice what's the difference here, right? So the server has completed the restart, and as you can see, the read workload is no longer happening. So we'll just reinitiate that to see how the buffer pool behaves here. I'm just going to refresh this metric. And as you can see, the buffer pool is not fully depleted with these parameters on. And it is loading back on from the dump. And as we initiate the read workload, we will see that the performance is not hampered much. I mean, it's as close to as it should be in a general sense, right? When you're running your workload onto the Azure Database for MySQL. Now, while this is going on, we will switch back to the metrics. And as you can see, the buffer pool is back to its previous state. And we will take a look at some of these parameters here. So we will take a look at now, like we will make changes to these parameters, and we will see how the buffer pool behaves with the buffer pool loaded startup and dump and shutdown parameters set to off. So I'm going to turn these parameters to off, and we need to restart the server because loaded startup is a static parameter that requires a restart for it to take effect. So as I click restart, so our Azure will apply these parameters and restart the server. So I'll just take a look at the notifications to monitor the progress here and go back to the metrics to take a look at what's going on. And our read workload is currently going on with the server from the VM. And so as you can see, this is pretty consistent. And so I have sped up the demo a little bit in the interest of time. So some of the sections would move faster than they would actually. And I'm just refreshing it here. So now shortly you will see a dip again in the buffer pool as the server goes to a restart. So now first step, it is we are applying the parameters and we are yet to reach the restart stage. And we can see our workload is still ongoing here. Now, if you see the QPS, this basically with the sysbench, we can see what is the QPS, the queries per second and transactions per second, and the latency metrics. So now back to the graph, and so there may be a little bit of delay with what we see in the metrics than what's happening in the server. It should be brief. So we will need to wait a bit to see the dip in the metric. So as we can see now, it is going through the restart. The parameters are applied, and the server is going through a restart now. So let me come back to the server blade here. And back to our graph, and let's refresh it, see if it has progressed. Now, while we are at this screen, I would also like to get your attention to other parameters here. So buffer pool pages flushed, which will show the pages flushed to the disk, and also memory percent, which you can monitor what is the memory consumption of your server overall, and in conjunction with the buffer pool will give you a very good idea how MySQL is utilizing the memory here. So, okay, back to our VM to generate some more load. It's the read-only load. Okay, so as you can see now, there is a slight dip. May not notice much here because it's pretty standard workload. But if you look at the metric here, the buffer pool pages data has completely dropped to 0. This is the effect you see with these parameters set to off. So we are not saving the cache to a file and loading it from there, but we are completely depleting that cache, and we will when the server restarts and comes back online, we will load the queries data back as the queries hit the server from 0. So this difference, this makes a huge difference for certain workloads. Like it could be your WordPress web application or some read-heavy application, which can benefit from when the server is restarted or you make some changes, that the buffer pool cache is there ready for you and the start times are lowered. So if you are restarting the server, or if it is going through a regular planned maintenance, or you are scaling up or scaling down your server, it helps with minimizing that downtime for you. So it's a little bit of help that adds up and help you reduce your downtimes. Okay, so we'll reinitiate some of the workload here, and let's go back to the metrics. So as you can see, there is a slight difference in the initial performance with the changes to these parameters. It's not much, but it can be significant when the workload is high. And you can see some changes to the transactions per second, basically. Now we see in the metrics blade, we are loading the buffer pool from scratch, and that graph that is going upwards. And similarly, the memory utilization also tracks similarly. Now, for some time, we will just wait and monitor this, and we can see the difference clearly in the graph. And this is what we have detailed also in one of the blog written by my colleague Rahul, which will show up, which will be shared with you in this screen shortly. Now, now we basically changed the parameters here, right? So, and we have gone through a restart. Now, just to make sure that this shows up correctly, so we are going to go through another restart once the server is back up. Now, as you can see, entire cache is depleted, so there is nothing retained in the cache, and it starts from scratch here. And so whatever workload we are generating, only that would be loaded into the memory, into the buffer pool data. So let me refresh it again. And the dots that you see is basically some data, metrics data is not showing up. Don't worry about that, but you will see that the buffer pool will load up and then it will stabilize. So right now you are seeing the graph running upwards, and slowly you will notice that it will go into a horizontal direction and will stabilize. So I've sped up the process here because it does take a lot of time as the queries generate. It may be faster in certain cases, but in this benchmarking, it tends to be a bit slower. But if you see that, yeah, as I refresh, that graph tends to go horizontal. All right, so I'm going to refresh again. Yep, as you see, it's going more horizontal. We'll wait a bit more time and then we will go through the restart again. So when we restart now, you will notice the clear difference in how the parameters, how this buffer pool behaves. So it's quite important in terms of understanding the performance related to MySQL when it comes to buffer pool. So as much as your data, as well as how well you did the indexing, and those are cached into the buffer pool, it will make a big difference in how your websites or your applications perform with Azure Database for MySQL. So it's very important that you tune these parameters according to your workload. So by default, we set it to some standard values, which should be applicable to most of the workload and work well. However, there can always be some tuning possible when it comes to certain unique workloads. Now I'm just going to hit the restart, and let's wait for the server to restart. And the last benchmarking completed. So good thing with Sysbench, we'll get to see what has been the results here. And yeah, you may not see much difference in this case because these parameters are crucial when the server restarts, help you keep the downtime minimum, but not on a related to performance on an ongoing basis. So there are other settings, configurations, benefits that would help you there. So now, as you can see, the buffer pool is completely getting depleted here. Rather than it would go halfway or go a little bit down and then come back up. Now I think the server has gone through the shutdown process. So it is up now. So and I'm starting this read workload. And you can clearly see the transaction per second has dropped to half at least the initial transactions. And then it jumps back to normal. So this is basically standard workload, which just repeats the same thing. So you would see the peak performance in the second attempt itself, or very shortly in the next second. But with the real workload, that may not be the case. So while we refresh for the metric to catch up to the server, and we'll see the buffer pool load up again. Yep, as you can see, the buffer pool is loading from scratch, and you should see the same pattern that you saw previously. How it loads up and gets stabilized. It goes into a horizontal direction, and that's the pattern you will see with the buffer pool load at startup and dumper shutdown parameters off. With them on, most of the things will be maintained in the file, and it will be loaded quickly during the startup. So it doesn't have to depend on the queries that come in. So most of the frequent queries should be already cached. So that's how, using the cache, you can speed up your performance of your read workloads and many web applications. And that's pretty much about the demo today. And you can go through the blog for more details, and we'll keep updating that as well with the latest information. Thank you, everyone, and back to you, Jim and Shreya.
Hey, thank you so much, Neil. Again, folks, y'all can learn more about about this information in Neil's blog post at that the link on the screen there, AKS MySQL buffer pool parameters. Really appreciate it, Neil, and thanks for taking the time so late in your day. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to the next section here, and I basically this is about building a PHP and flexible server app on Azure App Service. More than 50% of the websites on the internet use the LAMP stack of technologies: Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. If you're looking to build a PHP application, consider hosting it on Azure App Service, because it provides a scalable managed web hosting service that uses Linux OS and connected to your MySQL workload hosted on Azure Database for MySQL. I'd like to bring on Shreya Aithal, a product manager at Microsoft, to take us through how to quickly and easily build a PHP and Azure Database for MySQL flexible server app on Azure App Service. Welcome, Shreya, and thanks for joining us today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Thanks, Tim, for having me here. Hi, everybody. I'm Shreya Aithal. I'm a product manager in the Azure Database for MySQL team. I primarily work on interesting integrations with Azure Database for MySQL, like the one I'm going to talk about today.
Fantastic. Thank you. Over to you, Shreya.
Perfect. All right. So, with Azure Database for MySQL, right, there are multiple ways you can develop applications using the power of Azure ecosystem, right? You could use app services, you could use container apps, Kubernetes services, Linux VMs, and so on, or even use citizen development tools like Azure Power Apps or Power Automate. And meanwhile, you've got a plethora of other services that help you with these app development, be it for DevOps, integration, monitoring, optimization, or just for data manipulation. Now, today we are going to talk about, like Jim said, the PHP, deploying a PHP application on Azure App Service. PHP applications, in fact, there are around 77% of the websites on the internet are all built on PHP. And like Jim said, a majority of these are also based on the LAMP stack. So Azure App Service provides a fully managed and scalable web hosting option on the Linux OS. So you've got the Linux OS, Linux through App Service, you've got MySQL, and you've got your PHP application, which we'll try to deploy today. And we will use in this demo today GitHub Actions for doing the deployment and managing the DevOps. Right. So I'll directly jump into this. So we'll be basically building a PHP Laravel application. It's a sample application that we'll use, which is available for all of you to try out as well, and then deploy it on Azure App Service. The steps for this demo, there are going to be 5 steps. The first one is creating the resources itself. Fun fact, we've got something called Web App plus Database offering on Azure, which essentially creates a web app, a database, and secures it within a VNet. So it's the perfect solution for you to build your applications within seconds, right? It's just a few clicks, and I'll show you how easy it is. And that integration also actually allows for you to create a Redis cache as well and use that. So we'll first click use web app plus database to create the resources. Second, what we'll do is we will make sure that the database connectivity with the app service is perfectly set up. Third, we will deploy the sample code itself using GitHub Actions onto Azure App Service. Fourth, we'll make all the changes required in the database, basically, migrating database migration, schema migrations, etc. That's required. Just prep the database, and then 5 will just go ahead and run and see the results. Right. So I'll directly jump to the demo. I've recorded the demo before in hand just to make sure that all of your time isn't wasted on waiting for deployments. And I may pause the demo here and there in case I want to explain a little bit more. So let's see. Let's go with the flow. All right. Let's first go ahead and full screen the demo, and here we go. So in the Azure portal, just go ahead and search for web app plus database, web app database. This is a marketplace offering which you can find, and everything is so simple. You just give your resource group name, your region, a name for the web app, choose the runtime stack as 8.2, and the MySQL flexible server is automatically recommended for you, and server name and databases are also given. You can choose the Redis cache or not, and go ahead and choose the basic hosting plan just for this dev test purposes, or use the standard plan for everything else. All the database credentials will be generated and saved in the app settings of your app. We'll take a look at it as we go through the demo, but you don't need to bother writing it down at this point, right? So let's go ahead and deploy. Now, this deployment is definitely going to take some time. It's going to create an app service plan. It's going to create an app service app, that is the web app. It's going to create MySQL flexible server and all the surrounding VNet resources for you. I've sped it up, like I said. Let's go ahead and go to the resource. And in the resource section, let's go to environment variables. In the environment variables, you'll actually find all the database settings right here. Now, let's pause here and go back to take a look at the code itself. Go to github.com Azure Samples Laravel Tasks, and this is the sample application that you can fork. I'm going to fork it to my own repository, to my own organization, my own account, and this is the repository that I have created, right? In the configuration section, actually here, you can just click the period key and it will open up the Visual Studio browser experience for you. And you can make all your changes on the go on the browser itself. You don't need to install anything, any service. So this is just a cool feature that I wanted to show in between. Go to the database.php file, and here is where you will see how the code makes connection with the database. And here you will see that they're using app settings like db underscore username, password, etc., which is not really the same around here, right? So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and change these application settings to make sure they match what the code requires. Instead, alternatively, and ideally, you should be doing it the other way around. You could go ahead and make the changes in the code and update the code to use these settings. I just did this for the sake of simplicity. So I'm going to change the host, the database, the password, the port, the username, all of it to reflect what is in the code, and add a couple of more parameters like the SSL certificate to use for SSL connection, the log channel application setting to send the logs to app service logs, app debug parameter, which is actually a Laravel debugging variable, and also app key, which is used for Laravel encryptions. So all of these are required. Go ahead and click on apply and save them. And this is it for you to make sure that the application has everything it needs to run well as to connect to the database. Right. Now, the next step that you'll do is go ahead and deploy the code itself. So in the side bar, in the side pane, go to deployment, and in the deployment, go to Deployment Center. Here, like I mentioned earlier, we are going to use GitHub Actions to deploy the code, right? So select the source as GitHub and go ahead and authorize your GitHub account. So you can see I'm authorizing it to my account. I'm authorizing app service to my account. Choose the organization as well as the repository. That is the Laravel tasks repository that we just forked, and then choose main. And that's it, right? You can go ahead and click on save to go to deploy the code to Azure App Service. So let's click on save. And the deployment again is going to take some time. Usually it takes around 10 minutes as well. And meanwhile, you can track the progress in this logs tab. And if you check under the logs column here, you can actually click on it and it will take you to the GitHub Actions progress bar as well. And I've sped it up. Like I said earlier, I've sped it up. And as soon as it's successful, the other thing that you will need to do is this is the fourth step, right, where you migrate the database schema. Now, I'm going to pause it here for a bit, right? Now, the Azure Database for MySQL, like I told earlier, when we created this web app plus database, the MySQL flexible server, the Azure App Service are together inside a VNet. So it's not easy for you to access the flexible server from a client tool. So what we'll do is for the database migrations to access the flexible server, we'll use the app service container itself. So we'll run the DB migrations directly from the app service containers itself, right? We'll go do that by SSHing into the app service container and just running the database migrations here. And you'll see that the couple of tables that are required will be migrated as almost immediately. And once you have that, the final step before you go, ideally, like I told you, there were 4 steps and the 5th step was go ahead and run it, right? But there's one more small thing that you need to take care of if you're choosing PHP 8. The Laravel application actually begins running at the /public directory, right? Whereas the app service PHP container, the PHP container that is in the app service, essentially uses is Nginx, and which starts at the root directory. So what we need to do at this point is replace the we have a we should essentially make sure that it starts at the public directory, right? So what we have done is, for the simplicity of this application, we've created a default file which replaces the Nginx's configuration file and helps and also restarts it, just to make sure that the Laravel application begins in the right folder. So all you have to do is put that command in the startup command, which is basically copying that default file and also starting the Nginx again. And that's it. So this is just one caveat that you need to make sure when you're using PHP on app service. Once you're done with that, that's it. You can go ahead and navigate to the URL of the application, and you can see that your Laravel application is ready. You can create tasks, you can add how many ever tasks you want, delete it, play around with it, right? So you can use this sample application to learn how to deploy an application, a PHP application on Azure App Service, integrating with Azure Database for MySQL flexible server, all within a VNet. That's it from my side, Jim.
All right. Thank you so much, Shreya. I really appreciate it. This is very useful information. Folks, please be sure to check out the documentation for this tutorial at aka.ms MySQL PHP app service. Thanks again, Shreya, for taking time to be with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jim. See you.
Okay. Let's see. All right. We're going to move on now to the last section, where we're going to go over some of our latest feature releases and the upcoming roadmap. Really some exciting information here. Addressing the feedback we've received from all of you, we're thrilled to announce a new feature that now allows you to transition from private access that is a virtual network integrated connectivity method to public access or private link connectivity method. Earlier, this move was prohibited and you were expected to recreate a server in the public infrastructure and migrate to it. But now all you need to do is to click on this Move to Private Link button and go through a two-step wizard which describes the VNet, which detaches the VNet and allows you to either establish a private link or enable public access. Navigate to the link shown on the screen for a detailed tutorial. And now we're going to go over the latest feature roadmap for Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server. On-demand backup and export currently is in public preview. This provides the ability to export at-moment physical backup of the server to Azure storage account, Azure Blob Storage using Azure CLI. After you've exported it, these backups can be used for data recovery, migration, data redundancy and availability, or even auditing and other purposes. We plan to release it in public preview this month as well. This feature should be generally available in Q3 of calendar year 24. Next is a set of 3 maintenance-related features. First, flexible maintenance options. These allow you to reschedule your maintenance windows and even instantly initiate maintenance with the Reschedule Now option. This will be GA this quarter as well. Near zero downtime maintenance for HA-enabled servers. This feature is designed to reduce the maintenance downtime for HA-enabled servers to ensure that in most cases, maintenance downtime is between 40 and 60 seconds, pivotal for critical businesses that cannot compromise on high availability and require minimum interruption to their database operations. Again, this will be GA this coming quarter. Virtual Canary. With this feature releasing in preview this quarter, you can opt your dev, testing, and staging servers to be in a virtual canary. Servers in virtual canary will receive monthly updates in advance, which gives you the opportunity to perform additional layer of testing for these updates on top of our own internal tests to avoid issues specific to your workload, like the application level compatibility issues. It's essentially an efficient way to manage updates, align testing and production environments, and maintain operational stability with minimal disruption. Next, MySQL Discovery and MySQL Discovery and Assessment in Azure Migrate. With this functionality, you can use Azure Migrate the Azure Migrate service to discover MySQL servers in your environment, assess them by identifying their compatibility for moving to Azure Database for MySQL, and receive compute and storage SKU recommendations along with their costs. This is currently in private preview and planning to go public preview by the end of the quarter. These next 3 features have GA milestones in the next quarter, Q4 of calendar year 24. Error logs in server logs, which is now in public preview. This feature provides you with the option to view and download error logs under the server logs option for up to 7 days to analyze and troubleshoot issues. Long-term retention of backups is now in public preview. Previously, Azure Database for MySQL allowed for automated backups and on-demand backups to be retained for up to 35 days. With long-term retention, you can now retain backups up to 10 years to further aid your auditing and compliance needs. The accelerated logs feature went GA during build, providing up to 2 times the performance for your business-critical servers at no additional cost. However, currently this feature can't be enabled on servers that have custom managed keys or CMK enabled. This limitation will be removed by the end of Q4 this year. If you want to try out any of these new features in private preview, please do write to us at Azure Database for MySQL at service.microsoft.com. And we'll also publish a monthly update blog containing all of these updates about 2 days after the webinar. Probably look for it early next week. This latest update will be available at aka ms MySQL-monthly update. Folks, that's all for today. As we close out, I'm going to leave you with 4 things. First, be sure to check out our contributor initiative, start contributing today, and get badges and official recognition and more. We'd love to have your input on this. It'd be great. It's really easy to join and work your way up the different levels. Second, to learn more about our service, you can use these resources or feel free to reach out to us on our email ID. Third, stay tuned for more updates and announcements by following us on social media and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Our handle on YouTube and Twitter is @AzureDBMySQL. And finally, if you want to feature in our upcoming webinars or collaborate with us on any collateral, fill out this form at the link here and let us know. You can also use the same form to provide us feedback on this session, or also to provide requests or suggestions for topics you'd like to make sure that we cover in the future. Thanks again for everybody for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to seeing you on our next session, which will be next month on the 14th of August at 7:30 Pacific time. Thanks again. Everybody have a great day.